I'm joined this week by one of my friends. This is Miss Haley Dollarhide.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. You know, I just said Miss, and it's so funny. I've never realized that there's like Mrs. and Miss. I always just say Miss, like openly.
Yeah.
But really, a lot of you guys are Mrs.
I feel like people that aren't married are more aware of it than the people that are.
So even when I said it, you didn't think twice about it?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I realized I said, I was like, no, she's married. But I had a friend tell me one time, I worked really hard for that Mrs. title. So I
Working hard to
deserve
keep it too.
Exactly. So I always am like, I say that. It's such a funny term. But I'm so excited that you decided to join me and share your story, because your story, man, it comes with a lot of bumps along the way. And I say bumps so lightly because it is so much more than that. But I want people to get to know you, because I think beyond the fact of you being a great human being, you also have this story of inspiration in the end of everything that you've gone through to be who and where you are today. And that's a story that deserves to be told. So
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Haley, let's start. And you can kind of share these different pieces of your story, and then we'll get into each one. So I'll let you start from where you want to start, and we'll go from there.
I feel like I always start at the very beginning, just because I view it in my head as a timeline, everything. But I think when I was 5 or 6, my parents got divorced. But up until then, everything was very normal, leave it to Beaver. You know, at least from my point of view.
Yeah.
Small town in Mississippi. And then I feel like when my parents got divorced, that was the beginning of such a common tale of, you know, and especially in small towns in Mississippi, nobody in the 90s was talking about therapy or feelings. It was all just matter of fact, and the kids were along for the ride. My mother got remarried. They got married when I was in 2nd grade.
Okay.
By the time I got to 3rd grade, he was just very abusive. And I've learned now as an adult that not to spill his beans, but I think he had an abusive upbringing. And you hear that so much, people that, you know, they just repeat patterns that they hated themselves, but they don't know any different. Mm-hmm. So I'm also on this grace journey right now. You know, you have to give it to receive it. So that's where I am with that, because I actually hate this man. But
you're like, I hate you, but also
I do understand.
Yes.
You know, which is a really peaceful place to be. And as a Christian, you hear your whole life, peace beyond all understanding. And I feel like I'm finally at a place now where none of it really makes sense, but I am so at peace. But yeah, so my stepfather growing up was just very verbally abusive. Like, I was never touched or anything like that by him. And my mother did her best, but she also didn't have resources like we have now. And you certainly didn't talk about, you know.
Mm-hmm. Nothing that happens in the home.
Yeah. And don't air your dirty laundry, Morgan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The age-old saying.
Yeah, yes. And now I can't air it enough. I'm like, who wants to hear? I've got this new mantra now that's like, I am always going to be just who I am in the same room, because for years, Morgan, I was just somebody else everywhere I went. And it's very life-giving to just be yourself all the time. There's no story to keep up. There's no shame of other. I think that's also it, is I grew up and realized all of this shame I carried, none of it was actually mine. Mm. You know what I mean? It was, and you know, if you have a life partner or a spouse, you know, that's kind of in the deal of helping each other carry burdens. But outside of that, I don't really see an equation where you need to carry that deep a load of someone else's. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And especially as a child.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think I always say that boomer generation, because it's always a joke about how like our grandparents raised us like millennials, but it wasn't like that for them. It's just something about boomers where we're not talking about things, but I don't think it's because they don't want to. I really don't think they felt like they could.
Yeah, I think a lot of what was ingrained into that generation was you deal with things on your own and you have tough skin and you don't need to bring anybody else into the picture. This can be fixed on its own. There was a lot of that just intense, like, drive home that you don't need anybody else. And if you do, you're very weak.
Yeah.
And I think that was ingrained not just in men, but in women. I think it was ingrained in all of them.
No, honestly, I think especially for men. Mm-hmm. I feel like, back to my Bravo, because I love Bravo, you know that. But I was watching the the Southern Charm reunion last night. And these two guys, Craig, which you might have met with Amy. I think he's been on Amy's podcast and they've done things. But then Craig and Austin, they have this really great friendship. But it mimics like two girlfriends. And they talk about their feelings and cry. And I was thinking, people want people to express themselves, but they were getting all this hate about it. And I'm like, I think boys actually have it worse because you're supposed to be so exterior, like on the exterior, so tough, and it's really weak to cry. But yeah, so 3rd grade to about 4th grade. Yeah, we lived in this one place for 1 year and it wasn't that bad. Then where I spent the majority of my life, it was just awful all the time. It was things like, I tell this story all the time and I really am over it. And it comes up a lot because I'll never forget the look on my therapist's face when I was telling him this story. And I still to this day have like a weird thing with condiments, but I had a corn dog and I put too much mustard on my plate, according to my stepfather. And Morgan, he made me dump a whole jar of French's mustard in a bowl and made me eat it with a spoon because it was too much on my plate. And if you ask my mom, like, I love her, but if you ask her, her response is, we had been telling you forever to not pour too much on your plate. And that's where I think the disconnect from us is she, now granted, I don't see it from a mother's standpoint. I can't imagine what that was like for her. And the guilt and like wanting to do whatever I could to make it not seem so bad, Mm-hmm. But that's not normal.
No.
And that's not a correct punishment. Shape it no matter how you want,
Mm-hmm.
But it was stuff like that. Just, you would think he took joy. He was almost kind of like, he preyed on me a little bit. And my sister got a lot of it. And that is her story. So I try really hard not to speak from her experiences and how she felt. But, there were big moments where I will say this, the majority of my life, I felt uncomfortable in my home. And it was always walking on eggshells and go get the mail before your stepdad gets home and go, like if I was sitting on the couch and watching a show, like eating a snack after school, and I heard somebody pull into the driveway, Morgan, I would run like a bad guy was chasing me. I mean, it was just, that was normal. It really was.
It's like you lived your childhood in survival, and this person had all of these rules and stipulations that it was never really safe.
Well, yeah, and you never knew like what version you were going to get.
Mm-hmm. And some days it was going to be great, and some days it was going to be, oh, hold on, this is about to get really bad.
So I think that's the hard part for my mother. And again, I'm not speaking on her behalf. Can you tell I'm married to a lawyer?
Yeah. Like, how can I make sure?
Yeah.
But also, I love to remind people of a lot of things when they come in this room. But one in particular is that your story is your story to tell.
Yes.
And your accounts of it are your story.
Mm-hmm.
Is there another side to that story? Always.
Always, yes.
But it's also still your story. And you were very much a part of this story. And it's yours to do with how you please.
Yeah. And I am... like, I'm not a prophet or anything, but I do feel a strong, as an 8, I feel like that is my superpower I wasn't allowed to use. But I think because, they say like whatever your Achilles heel is. So like for Enneagram 8s, it's the vulnerable part of it. But ironically, when we are vulnerable, it's the most powerful thing that we can offer somebody. Mm-hmm. And so I live my life by faith, and nothing will stop me from doing what I can to, even if it's just like somebody understanding me a little bit better or giving someone grace a little bit better. But the hang up for my mother is it wasn't all bad. That is the hill she will die on.
Well, yeah. And I can speak from being in an abusive relationship. This is something I recently opened up about, and mine was on a different side. There was physical and emotional. Yours being even just on the emotional, which people often just be like, well, it was just yelling. It was just verbal. No, you're fighting a similar battle in the sense where you are convinced of a different reality. They love to create a world where you believe that they are actually the person in the right and you are the person in the wrong. And so much of an abuser's reality is they believe everything they're doing is correct. And they can't do any wrong. So that's why you walk on eggshells. That's why you never know where they stand, because it's their world. Mm-hmm. And you're just living to exist in it. It's also why your mom experienced this. Well, there's good days. You're justifying what they've told you to justify.
Right.
And you have this warped version of reality. And so there is no blame from me to your mom, even never having known her, and will probably never meet her. But there's no blame from me in the sense that she thought what was happening was normal.
Well, and, I've told you this before, the Enneagram like truly changed my life. And for the year that I got into it, I had everybody in my family take the test. And my mom is a 3. And I think for her, it's a sign of failure. And that's like, you talk about Achilles heel with the
achiever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, all she hears is, I lost motherhood. Mm-hmm. I failed, and
I failed at this relationship. Mm-hmm. I failed at this marriage. I failed at my kids. All she's hearing is that on repeat.
Yeah. And she can't accept that. That's very, very, and I think that is important to say that is harder for her to accept than me, because I have like such little 3 in me. I'm not competitive. I'm not win or lose. I'm like, let's play to have fun, But yeah, so I think for her, because I didn't, and this is what I was telling you earlier, I think because I didn't come to her with a lot of things, her question is, why didn't you come to me? And why didn't you? And my answer is, and always will be, I was a child. That is the role I choose to play with my children, is letting them know always, no matter what it is, I can handle it. Like, we will get through this together. You are never alone. And honestly, Morgan, that wasn't something I could verbalize or even understand until last year. So I went, Therapy Cat, mm-hmm. that does a podcast with Amy. I didn't even know Amy at the time. And I had been going to Cat. I went every Tuesday for an entire year. And there were so many things that just being allowed to have this, is non-biased the right word? Like, I mean, she had no dog in any of it.
Yes, that's the role that a therapist is supposed to provide you. It's an unbiased perspective of your experiences instead of getting like half of one biased view and half of another and piecing them together.
Yeah, and like back to echo what I said earlier about burdens and shame and things that we carry. That's not even John, my husband's job. Like, he can be there for me, but that's a lot for somebody to carry. Mm-hmm. And, I talked about losing my virginity with Kat, and it was weird because have you seen Firefly Lanes?
Yes.
Okay. So there was about 6 months where I would watch these shows or movies and I felt so like God was trying to talk to me through them, because like it would be like so random how I'd start watching it. And I was watching Firefly Lane, and when is it Katherine Heigl?
Katherine Heigl's in it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Her character as a child she lost her virginity, and it felt consensual based on the knowledge we had,
At the time.
at 20 years ago. And I was watching, I just started bawling, crying. And my husband was like, okay, like, it's not that sad. And I'm like,
okay?
no, like, John, I'm having this epiphany that it changed the entire trajectory of my life, Morgan, from that very first time. And so like the practice the practice I preach, I guess, that the tool I've been given in therapy is to just go all the way, like retrace all the steps until you get to the root. And so I was 15, and it was my friend's older brother who was 18 with a girlfriend, and he had just finished high school. So he was like getting ready to go play ball at like a community college or something. And we were drinking Zimas, remember those with like
I do remember a Zima.
was it with a Jolly Rancher down in the bottom? And I was much younger than all of these girls. And I remember, everything about it. I remember like being excited, but I also remember thinking like we were about to start dating and it was this thing. I mean, I say this and you can edit if you need to, but I was such a virgin that I had never even worn a tampon. Wow. And I remember when I
By choice?
Yeah. Like I was terrified to use a tampon. And I remember coming home and I had spotted, because Morgan, I had no proper information to even know that was normal. And my sister at the time had already gone to college. So I was in the house all alone. And in my mind, it was like, well, yay, I'm not pregnant because I just started my period. And I remember going to the bathroom when I got home, using a tampon and thinking, well, what does it matter now? And I was so afraid to tell anyone that I just never did. But in my mind, with all the religious trauma that I discovered later, I felt damaged. Like I remember thinking, well, it doesn't matter now because I've already lost my virginity. So it's like the seal is already broken.
And can I point out that it shouldn't have ever been it doesn't matter now. Like that's a product that your body needed.
Yeah.
That you should have known was okay to use, and it didn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was something that was a matter of your health.
Yeah.
And that you had to blur the lines between the two is just heartbreaking.
But it stayed blurred for years. Like, I don't know if I'm not kidding. I was sitting in Kat's room at therapy that day. Just, it hit me like a stack of bricks. Like, it was like I was finally seeing the real reality of it. And just, my very first therapist told me this would happen. But we worked on inner child stuff a lot. And he was like, there's going to be a day where your current self catches up. And I think I'm finally there, which is great. But, like on Inside Out, Riley, we made it, I made it.
That's such a sad part.
I know. It's brutal. But, it changed so much for me. And it affected it was like I think that was the day I put my armor on. Like when you learn so I started my Enneagram journey in therapy. And in Enneagram world, they call it your adaptive self, like the day that you became this way. And some people believe it's the day you're born, and some people believe lots of other things. But if you have a really traumatic, which we all have trauma, but if you have a especially traumatic situation in your life, it can be altering. And I feel like that's a pivotal moment for my journey, because I felt the heaviness of carrying, and not to throw men under the bus, but that was the day I really realized the heaviness of carrying a man's shame. And because, the only reason I couldn't tell anybody is because he had a girlfriend, remember? Mm-hmm. So then it was like, okay, well, this is just how it works, and I can be this, beck and call girl, And so sex from then on was very not heavy for me.
Well, we're about to get into like really one of the hardest probably moments in your life, and not that any of these are even a little bit easy.
Yeah.
But we're about to get into the one that's like even probably your most traumatic. But what I know with that information and hearing the theme of all these stories is they all involve a guy that's older than you.
Every single one of them.
That was supposed to be either a leader or have the ability to take care of you or have the wisdom of an older adult. Like, I don't want to call them authority figures because they're not.
Right, but that was my version of that was my idea
what they should have been.
Yeah.
And all of them are. And we're going to get into that, but I'm going to let you head into this kind of last piece of.
Yeah. So in college, I, went to a friend's house, someone I thought was a friend, and we were drinking and playing games. It was cranberry juice and vodka. I'll never forget it. And I was not a first time ever to drink college person. And still to this day, I can drink vodka all night long and not get like hammered drunk. I don't know what it is, but give me one like spritzer and I'm, telling dirty jokes to the preacher. Yeah. But I had one drink. And then the next thing I remember, do you remember gaucho pants?
I do remember gaucho pants.
And we wouldn't wear panties with them because they were like so thin. You would have a nasty panty line. That comes up.
Yeah.
And then this is another trend I hope that never comes back.
Which I also hope gaucho pants never come back. I'm good on those.
But honestly, I could deal with those but the clear bra straps.
Oh yeah, those are bad too.
We would wear these like silky, lacy camisoles with just wear the strapless bra.
Yeah.
Because they weren't even comfortable. And if you had like spray tan.
You just unlocked a piece that I think I tried to
go back,
hide in my brain.
But that's what I was wearing. And I remember waking up, and I was not a part of something, like I was in the middle of sex and my straps were broken and my pants were not even off. Like it was like, they were so stretchy. Like he just went up my pant leg. And if that's too much, just.
I want you to share your story as you feel.
I woke up and I remember feeling like my mind was there, but my body was like just completely unable to move. So similar to, I don't know if you've ever had anesthesia.
Yeah.
Or just, like what like when I had a C-section, I compared it to that. Just very numb, like heavy. And then when I finally got up, he said, if you tell anybody, I'll never talk to you again. And I got my stuff and I left. And this was in Oxford, Mississippi. I went to Ole Miss. And the square closes like during the week. It shuts down during the week at midnight. And on weekends, it used to be like till 2 a.m. Well, where I was these condos like right off the square. And I walked with my shoes in my hand, my bra broken, And I was still so disoriented that I called the first person. You want to talk about God. I called the first person that had been saved in my cell phone, who was a girl named Angela that I had met just a few weeks before in the dorm. She's from Atlanta and she's an A. So I clicked on it and she had just so happened to be up going to the shower in the dorm and saw my call. And she was like, where are you? And I couldn't read. I was spelling out the name of a store on the square. So she's like, oh my God, I'm coming to get you. And I got in the car with her, and she could tell like something was very wrong. And I said, I think I might have just been raped. I'm not sure. And she took me to the university police, and they were like, we can't help her because it didn't happen on campus, but this is what you should do. So, I mean, they were very nice, but it was like not in their jurisdiction or whatever.
Which shouldn't be a thing. But
yeah, I know. So she took me, maybe they suggested she take me to the hospital. I can't remember, but we ended up at the hospital. And Morgan, this is like a second layer of it. The nurses in there were following, it's called a rape kit. So like they have this protocol that they have to follow. And so first my body like went into shock, and they had to like wrap me in all of these heated blankets.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that was part of the drug or just like the trauma of it.
Probably a mixture of
both. Yeah. So all of that happened. I'm in there, and these two, I mean, it was like Tweedledee and Tweedledum. These women were like arguing over who was going to do this, and like, well, what do we do? I mean, it was like they were reading instructions of a puzzle. You know, they're like scraping under your fingernail and touching areas, and you're in fluorescent lighting, you know.
And you're already scared. You already don't know what just happened to you in a way, and you're freaking out, and you're stuck, and you're getting poked and
and you're thinking of the magnitude of like, it's all happening so fast, and you still haven't even wrapped your mind around like whether or not you want to tell anybody. Mm-hmm. And now like, it was just a lot. And because I wasn't a minor, they said I had the choice to call my mom, you know, like, 'cause, you know, I was 18, and I did call my mom. She and my sister came to the rescue, and then we went straight to the police station. And they were, you know, that was another part. Like at this point, I had never spoken about sex in any form with my mom, and she sat in the room with me and a stranger that was the police officer or the detective or whatever. And I had to like really go into detail, and I couldn't say, you know, I had to say like penis, vagina, which at 18 was still like horribly embarrassing in front of your mom. Mm-hmm. And so they waited until after 4 p.m. to arrest him, because if they had done it before 4, he wouldn't have had to spend the night. He came from a prominent family, which to this day, nothing has ever, I mean, we did go to trial, and I got ripped to shreds in front of a grand jury, and it was like, I just want to be done with this. Because, Morgan, nobody took my side in this. No one. It was like around rush time, like with sororities and stuff. And some people were like, oh, she just did this for that, or, you know.
And you got blamed.
No, and I always tell people, this was not a moral hangover. At this point in my sex life and my sex journey, if I was going to cry rape, I would have done it before this. You know what I mean? And the dean of Ole Miss had like written me like an absent excuse, like I could take a leave and not be, you know, I didn't have a ding against my credits or anything. And, you know, I took some time, but I never saw a therapist. We never spoke of it again. Well, then I find out, so when you're doing the rape kit, they give you essentially a Plan B pill. You take it, you start your period, it's, you know, it's done. And I had started a heavy period, and so I just...
You didn't think much of it.
But then I found out I was pregnant, and that was terrifying. And so I made the decision to have an abortion, which I honestly thought I would never, ever, ever tell anyone. I really did. And I can honestly say a big part of me died that day, and not because of what, like, maybe pro-lifers might think. I just felt numb to everything at that point. It was like, okay, I'm not going to have anyone that wants to be in this space with me. There is no place to talk about it. I have to I really became tough as damn nails that day. It was like, okay, from this point forward, that's it. Like, we're not talking about this again. It's over. And if it is out of sight, it is out of mind, and we're never going to go there. And it wasn't until I started dating John, my husband now, who I could tell was different than people I had dated in the past. But it came up because we were excited to start our own family. And I was having some issues. And it was like just abruptly all this guilt came out of nowhere.
Because it was like a volcano that was just sitting there
waiting. You know, my therapist says it's like champagne. If you shake it up and then you wait forever to like pop it, you just need to slowly, you know, Coca-Cola bottle or whatever. So I told John, and he sat with me in it, and, you know, I was very worried about how he was going to judge it. And it honestly wasn't until I started relationships with my children outside of diapers. You know, when this whole like Roe versus Wade stuff came up, and all, it brought up, you know, some people take to social media too loudly. And it was people that I really have relationships with, and I know, and they were saying really awful things about people in general that are pro-choice. And it always shocks me when women, because my stance on that is always no woman, like not a single one, it doesn't matter for what reason, wants to be there. You know, so like, just let's rally from woman to woman. Like, hey, let me just be there for you, because I know this can't be easy. And I realized that a lot of my friends didn't know. So they weren't doing it to be in my face. And honestly, a lot of people I've talked to about it since then see it in a different perspective. Because I'm like, I didn't want to be there, but I also didn't want the other option.
Yeah.
You know?
You were faced with an impossible decision.
And you were truly damned if you do and damned if you don't.
You didn't even want to be in the first place. You didn't ask to be in. You didn't want to be faced with that type. And you even took every step that you were supposed to take.
Yeah. It was wild just to think. Thinking about the magnitude of that alone is wild to me now, because I have 2 daughters. Mm-hmm. And I just cannot fathom. So this is the part I was telling you, my therapist was saying, you'll run in, like your current self will hit your younger self, and you'll catch up. But then there will be these parts with your children that you will be awakened unexpectedly, because you see so much of them in you.
Yeah. And
so I knew that was coming, but I didn't know it was coming until it like really got here. And I started thinking about my youngest daughter, Frances. She is so much, honestly, both of our kids are such a good blend between the two of us. But Frances loves her daddy the way that I did. And I think about how devastated she would be, Morgan, if he just like left and like didn't ever talk to her again.
Mm-hmm. Or treated her poorly.
Yeah.
Or something happened to her in the capacity that did when you were 18, or something happened in the capacity that did when you were dealing with the first guy, that something happened. Like, in all of those scenarios, you can't possibly fathom.
No. And like my mom came in town last weekend, and it actually didn't end well, because we touched base on some things, and her reality of it is much different than mine. But the problem that I face with that relationship with her is, and honestly, she probably feels the same way about me, but her unwillingness to extend grace to something that she disagrees with. Mm. You know what I mean?
Well, I think for you, Haley, unfortunately, and it shouldn't be, but I think unfortunately a lot of the things that you've dealt with are probably a lot of things that people don't know how to give grace to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I mean, it's
and I say
tricky.
That so unfortunately, like, it should not be that way.
It shouldn't be conditional.
It shouldn't. And you shouldn't be able, you should be able to talk about each of these scenarios and each parts of these stories and say, this is what happened to me, and somebody just be like, that's horrible and that should have never happened to you. Instead of it being, well, I see it this way, or this is another side of it. The facts are laid out. This is the fact.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, that was like the aha moment for me in therapy, is when my very first therapy, John Evans, was the door opener to changing my life. But he looked at me and said, it's really not normal. Like, that's really bad.
None of those are normal.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, he was like, you need to face that, because I think I had tried for so long to justify it. You know what else he told me to remove from my vocabulary is the word just. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just like nothing is just.
Because I learned this too, like 5 years ago. And it's because you're trying to justify everything. Mm-hmm. Don't justify it. It is what it is.
Yeah, it is exactly what it is.
And then it's a filler word. You don't even need it.
You do not need it. Especially, and the hardest habit of mine was when someone would compliment me. Like, whatever it is. And it's like, oh, it's just, it could always be better. I mean, everything could always be better, but everything could also be worse.
So when you finally entered therapy, gosh, a year and a half maybe?
No, well, I started therapy in 2020.
Okay, but still, all of these are long after.
But I didn't go every week until
recently,
yeah.
But still, this is long after
all
of these events.
Mm-hmm.
Up until then, how were you coping? How were you dealing?
Not another Bravo reference. Not well, bitch. Yeah. She's from New York, and she Dorinda. No, I was not doing well at all. Like, Teresa Giudice flipped the table at anything that didn't settle with me correctly. I lashed out. I think that's the best way to sum it up. Like, and I didn't understand. This was the big thing that was so life-giving to me with Enneagram. From my perspective, was the only perspective. And it was very much like, well, I would have done it this way. And because she didn't, it's wrong,
But I bet, my guess, is that you were trying to take your power back.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure there's like a whole science behind this.
Well, because having not to the point ever talked about it, ever worked through any of that, but you were finally in a safe space with your husband and you had your family and things were good. You probably felt like, okay, I've figured this out and I do feel like I have my power now.
Yeah. I don't think I got my power though until like recently.
No, but you probably thought you did because you were
saying.
In a safe space. You weren't in survival anymore. You weren't fighting someone all the time. You weren't on eggshells. I don't think we realize the drastic change that happens when you're no longer living on eggshells, that alone.
Yeah, you're almost in eggshells, like waiting for eggshells.
Literally.
You know what I mean?
And to not be in that state, you're like, okay, so I want everything to go my way. For so long, nothing went my way.
Yeah, nobody listened. So you thought what you were doing, you went the other extreme. If there's something I've recognized in traumatic events of our lives, we often go the direct opposite because we want so much of the different. And then you somehow, when you start to heal and grow and get better, you find your way in the middle. Yeah.
And that's probably where you are now, which is truly where the power lies.
Yeah, it's great. It really is so great to just feel so light. I saw this quote like recently, and it says, she was set free when she realized the cage was her own thoughts. And that was really profound for me because everything I did was always based off of someone else's sign off. Mm-hmm. How is this going to make them look? How is this going to make them feel? All the while, I'm not taking in any consideration of like how the person living inside this body feels. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, sometimes being selfish gets poo-pooed. And I'm like, I think more people need, like, there's a great way to be selfish.
You can still be a good person and be selfish.
Yeah.
I think we've associated it with really bad things. And don't get me wrong, there are very selfish, bad people in the world.
Yes.
But you can selfishly want the best for yourself. You can selfishly want to make yourself happy. You can selfishly deserve to feel safe.
Yeah.
All of those things are technically considered selfish.
Yeah, we should come up with like a word.
There should be a better word than that.
Yeah.
But technically, in the technicality of the way people view the world, all of those things are selfish. But what you were actually doing was caring for yourself for the first time in a really long time.
And people that know you one way, this is something I always call it my friend cleanse. I went through a major divorce with friends when I left Mississippi to come here. Around that time is when I started evolving and, branching out into even just politics. Like I can remember like believing one thing always because that's just like what everybody in my hometown believes. But like I remember kind of coming into my own decision because I landed there.
Yeah.
And just things like that. Even church. Church is a big thing for me. I am closer to God than I've ever been, and I very rarely go to church. And that's just my journey. I'm not saying that people can't find that same relationship going every Sunday. But yeah,
you've just had multiple moments of your life that have shaped who you are in this moment right now, which for you probably feels like the best version of yourself, if I had to guess.
Yeah, and I will say the one thing I can without a doubt stand on is knowing the difference between forcing and trying. And that's something I tell my girls every day because anytime, Morgan, even down to an Instagram post, anytime in my life I have ever forced something, it has not been successful for me. And when I just finally gave up the forcing and was like, I'll try this and I'm not going to just give up because it's hard. But when I am just authentically who I am, it's great.
Things always work out in that way. And they also work out exactly how they're supposed to in that capacity.
Yeah, no, they do.
I have learned. I did want to ask you too. I mentioned the fact that all of these events in your life involved men. When you met your now husband, what was that like?
Crazy. Like, I worked for his dad. His dad is not alive anymore, but he was a cinematographer. And at the time, I was trying to pursue music in Nashville. That ship has sailed. I was on American Idol and all that. Well, it was like in between time of moving to Nashville and still being in Mississippi, his dad hired me as craft services for a Mississippi tourism commercial. And when the commercial shoot was over, we had what they call a wrap party. Like if you're in the industry, but like some people are like a wrap party.
Basically a celebration that everything ended and it went well.
Yeah. And so it happened to be my birthday. And so John's dad threw a big party at his house. And John came. And I met him. He looks like nobody I've ever dated. He acts like, he had, at the time, it's funny because like we didn't have Instagram then, or if we did, it was so new, only kids did. But we had Facebook, and his Facebook said, so it said Mississippi State, and then it said MC class of 2010. And I was like, this guy is older than me. And he's still in his undergrad. Like, what a loser. Like, okay, it took you 17 years to graduate undergrad. And then come to find out he's this like lawyer at this prestigious law firm. He graduated law school. He was just a ding dong and didn't know how Facebook worked. Because Mississippi College has a Mississippi College, and they have a Mississippi College School of Law. And he put on his Facebook that he graduated Mississippi College. But that's, you see what I'm saying? So I was like, that's how you know, John, I wasn't after you for anything, because I thought you were like a loser, actually. But we were hot and heavy in the beginning, and it was really fun. I think both of us knew. Like, I knew after the first time I hung out with him, I told my girlfriends, I was like, I'm going to marry him. And they were like, Haley, reel it in, And I was like, nope, I'm telling you, I'm going to marry him.
But you didn't have any, like, fearful of this? Was it because there was something about him that felt
I really did
safe?
just know, and maybe so. But I also, too, Morgan, didn't look past, like, Friday night.
But you thought you were going to marry him.
But I mean, like, if I really sat down and thought about it, I'll say this. I felt there was a difference. But, like, if I didn't end up marrying him, it would have been like, well, I can't say that because it probably would have. It was just kind of like something always kept me coming back. But I didn't invest too much into anything. But that's a better way of saying it. Like, I had always had balls drop. So putting all of the eggs in a basket or whatever was fun to say, but like I wasn't disappointed if it didn't happen because that was what I was so used to.
You were so used that it could just fall and you're like, okay, whatever, we'll back to square one.
Yes.
Okay.
So we dated and it was kind of rock. Then once it started getting serious, it kind of got rocky because then later I found out that he was like, he had just gotten out of a bad relationship also, but he told me later that he was so rude to me and so uncommittal was because he felt it too and he was scared to this be the last person he dates and he wanted to get that single out of his system. But yeah, I mean things I really liked about John. Every guy I had ever dated before had come from essentially like a Leave It to Beaver family, and it was always so hard for them to relate or understand me because everything had been just so easy. And while John didn't have like such a traumatic childhood, he grew up with an alcoholic father who ended up dying in a house fire from alcohol, fell like passed out. Like John knows family drama.
Well, and he had empathy, I would imagine, for your experiences just as you had empathy for his.
Yes, which is funny because John's an Enneagram 5.
Okay.
And that is like, that's the main thing they lack is empathy, which is funny because he was such a softie for me. But now he is my best friend still. I mean, I told him just like 2 days ago, he saved my life and he didn't even know it. And he's like, you saved mine. And I'm like, I know that sounds so cliche, but he is genuinely the only thing in my life ever that is just solid as a rock and stable.
Consistent. I've always said it and I will continue to say it. Consistency is so sexy.
Oh my God. I know.
You never realize it until it happens and you're like, yeah, okay, whatever you want, I got it.
Yeah.
I would love to sit here and talk with you all day and we totally could. There's 2 things I want to ask you before we end this and wrap this up. But what do you feel like for you in your life now, having all of these moments? Like, what's something you wish you would have known maybe when you were going through any of these experiences that maybe you can look back now and be like, I wish I would have had that information, or I wish I would have been able to do this?
Probably that I wasn't broken. I think that's another like common feeling from all of this, like from the beginning, like the dad, the stepdad, the sex, all of it was that it was somehow a product of me. Like I was broken or I was damaged or I was constantly trying to swim out of just really dark holes that I thought I caused,
And you didn't.
And I didn't.
But in the moment, in all of these moments, you were probably feeling that way.
Because that was one of the first, so like in this inner child thing we did, my therapist was like, close your eyes and go back to your very first memory. And I was like, okay. And I like went somewhere faster than I would have imagined had he had asked me that on the spot later. And he was like, no, you're you and she's her. What are you going to say to her? And I was like, everything's going to be okay. Just, it's all, and I know that sounds so like cheeky or not cheeky, but like something that should be on a sign at Buc-ee's, but like tchotchke. That's the word I was looking for, not cheeky. But
the inner child often does want very simple things. Very much, you're going to be okay. They want a hug. They want safety. They want, they don't need these big elaborate things. They just kind of need to be seen and heard.
Reassured. Yeah. And yeah, so that's it.
I'd like to point out too, because we got so much into so much of your past, but like you today is incredibly successful. You have a job that you love. You found your way back into the music industry in a different capacity. You have a husband that you love is your rock, as you said. You have daughters that you love, a life that you love. I think so much of your story is a testament to there's always light. It's just finding it and finding the right time and space for it. And you're also a testament that truly you can get through anything.
You really can.
You can. And it's a reminder of like if you are in your darkest, deepest moments right now, there is a light.
Yeah.
And Haley's had multiple of these moments where she had to find the light, and you did.
Yeah.
So I always end episodes with whether it's a piece of motivation, advice, inspiration, however you want to go in that direction. But all of these things in your life, where you are now, however you want to leave us, the floor is yours.
I love to say, when you give up trying to fit in, you find where you belong. And it's really a beautiful place to be.
I love that. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing such difficult parts of your story, but also you're truly an inspiration in what you've been through and where you are now, that I'm happy you've chosen to use your voice with this story.
Thank you.
And I know that's really hard some days though too. So
no, yeah, for sure. But I agree. Thank you.
Thanks for being here.